Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today I wanted to go over the most popular questions I get asked about Urgot in Season 11. So let's just get right into it. Alright guys, let's start off with the most common question we get asked. That's if Kraken Slayer is viable on Urgot. In my opinion, I don't think it's very good. I don't think it's a very consistent item. I do think you can win games with it if you want to have some fun. But let's just go through some of the problems that I have with the item. So the main issue, the biggest issue for sure, is you're getting a lot of wasted stats. Urgot doesn't benefit from the attack speed or the crit, which is also the mythic passive on the item too. So it also counts as a mythic item, which means you can't build another mythic item, which is a pretty big deal. But yeah, you can't crit in W. Your W is a fixed rate, so you don't benefit from attack speed. So you're mostly just paying for damage, and you're basically paying for damage and true damage, which is a lot of gold for just those stats when Urgot already scales into the game really well and you have damage later anyway. The other problem is this build is super reliant on sticking on people with your W. And on top of that, you're going to be squishy too. So Urgot's a champion that gets kited really heavily. You know, all these champions are so mobile this season, so it's really hard to stick on people with W. Like, they can just run from you. And not only that, but if you get CC'd with this build, like, you have a big hitbox. If you get like morgue binded or something, like, you're just gonna die with this build. Another bad thing about this build, if you fall behind, you're gonna struggle getting back into the game a lot. That goes for any pure offense build on Urgot. You know, if you're not building defensive stats, if you're building pure offense, you basically have to, you want to be fighting, right? But if you're behind, then you can't fight. So it's just kind of like wasted stats. And then if you get camped, you just really struggle to get back in the game. You know, I've tried this build out a few times, and I've really struggled every time through the early game, especially if I got camped. The next big thing, you're going to struggle to get fears off in team fights because you just die quicker. And not only that, but if you do happen to get a good fear off, then you're not even utilizing the Kraken Slayer W damage. So, I don't know. I think the item is kind of a bait. You do get the full damage. You get the full true damage off your W. It doesn't get halved or anything. But that's really the only good thing about the item. There's too many downsides, in my opinion. And I think there's just more consistent items. Like, honestly, late game, once you get onto a squishy, you pretty much kill them anyway with Urgot. Like, you don't need the true damage. But if you guys do happen to do this build, one cool thing about it is it does work. The true damage does heal you on Omnivamp. So you definitely should run like Ravenous Hunter and Ravenous Hydra, because those both work from the true damage proc. That is one kind of fun thing I found when I was testing it out. But yeah, I don't think Kraken Slayer is worth it. It looks like a fun item. It looks like a cool item, but you're just too squishy. There's too many downsides, too many wasted stats in my opinion. You're better off just going for something more consistent, and you're still going to scale off levels with Urgot, so you don't really need that extra true damage. Your passive scales so well into like tanks and stuff. And you can always buy like Cleaver and that Shrilia's Grudge item this season, so there's a lot of other ways to deal with tanks. You don't really need the true damage. But yeah. That's my opinion on Kraken Slayer. Don't think it's worth it, but if you want to have some fun and go for kind of like a troll build, you definitely can still win with it. Alright, next question we got is, when should I buy Goliath Drinker and how should I use the active? So I've been personally buying Goliath Drinker if they have 3 or more melee champions. The reason for this is because they're going to be stacking up a lot more in team fights if they're melee. And it's going to allow you to get bigger actives, which the more people you hit with Goliath Drinker active, the more you're going to heal. So it is pretty important. The two situations where you want to use the active is, one, when you're on really low HP, you can use it to bait an enemy in. I usually try to use it when I'm about below half HP. You don't want to go too low because there's so much burst in this game right now to where you could actually just die if you save it for too long. I have had that happen a few times. So try to use it around half, I would say, maybe a little bit under half. If you do get lower, then that's great, but you don't want to risk it. The other time is just, you can use it as a basically just damage for your combo, so you can get fears off. It flows really well with your combo. I've done that many times actually, and it's actually gotten me the pull off where I wouldn't get the pull without the item. So just using it as a damage source is also okay, but preferably you want to use it when you get lower HP and try to use it on more targets so you heal more. Next question that I get a lot is, when should I build Stridebreaker? I've been personally building Stridebreaker into heavy range team comps and if I'm in a range matchup. You also want to make sure that you take approach velocity if you're going Stridebreaker, because it does give you that slow on the active. The main reason you're building Stride isn't for that dash. I know a lot of people think that dash is super small, but the radius that you're getting that 2-second decaying slow is actually pretty big. And that's going to give you another way to proc your approach velocity, which is really nice in those range matchups. And it's also going to give you more movement speed every time you build a legendary item, so it's going to scale nicely into range team comps. Next question we got is, when should I build Ravenous Hydra over Titanic Hydra, or vice versa? I want to start off by saying that I think both are really good on Urgot. My rule of thumb has pretty much been, if I'm really ahead, I'll go Ravenous Hydra, and if I'm behind, I'll go Titanic. If I'm just even, it depends on the team comp, so this is another thing that's really important. Titanic's going to be better into range heavy comps, and Ravenous Hydra is going to be much better into melees. And Titanic's also good into melees as well, but Ravenous Hydra feels much better if they have melee heavy team comps. The reason is you want to be benefiting from that splash damage, and if they're stacking up, then you're going to be benefiting way more from it. The splash damage on the Titanic is like much wider, so you can it's actually pretty good against range still. Another thing to keep in mind is how much like anti-heal they have. You know, if they have like 3 or 4 ignites on the team, you might not want to go Ravenous. That's a many thing to consider. Another thing to consider is if you're going to be building Spirit Visage that game, then Ravenous Hydra might be a better option. So if you have like a Sirach on the team that's like spam healing you, or like you guys are going to get Ocean Soul, stuff like this I think is something to think about when you go Ravenous. But both are really good. Basically, if you get ahead, you can go Ravenous Hydra. If you get behind or like even, then you can go Titanic. That's kind of what I've been doing, and that's been working pretty well for me. Next up, we got, when should I go PTA over Conquer? This season, I'm personally not running Conquer at all. I've been running PTA pretty much every game. I've actually been going Fleet sometimes into those range matchups, or like really poke heavy matchups, which I'm still kind of testing, but I actually can recommend Fleet if you're struggling into range team comps. But anyways, I've been going PTA pretty much every game this season. The Conquer healing got nerfed this season, and also extended fights are just more rare. I feel like it's more all about just like damage right now, and honestly trying to have a good early lane, because the games just don't go long enough nowadays. And also the games where Conquer was good back in the day, it's not like PTA was bad in those games, so I'm personally just running PTA pretty much every game, going for that damage, going for that good lane phase. And if you scale, you're going to scale really hard even without Conquer in this season, so I've been running PTA pretty much every game and Fleet into ranged. So next question is, should I max Q or E second after my W? Personally, I max E most games after my W. I do put an extra point in Q at level 4, and that's just to help out the lane phase a little bit, because you still get your W at level 9. If I'm against a range champ, or if I'm snowballing really hard, I'll max Q second, and that's just for the extra damage plus the extra little bit of slow. But most games it's going to be E max second. It's going to keep you safer. E's kind of like your playmaking ability, so you get lower cooldown. I definitely think E second after your W is going to be better in most games. Alright, next question is, who do I ban as Urgot? Most games I ban Malphite just because I find him really annoying and really just boring to play against, to be honest. The other champion that I ban sometimes is Lucian, which is actually probably the matchup that I find the hardest on Urgot. Vayne is also really hard, but you see Lucian top more in my opinion, so Malphite and Lucian are my bans right now. Next up, we have, what are the worst matchups for Urgot? My personal least favorite matchups would be mostly range champs, I would say. I think the melee champs that are very hard for Urgot would be Wukong, Mordekaiser, Poppy, Tryndamere. I would say those are probably the 4 hardest melees. Other than that, it's mostly range champs, stuff like Vayne, Lucian, Heimerdinger, sometimes Kayle, Cassiopeia, Vladimir. All those champions are pretty annoying. The best tip that I can give for playing into range champs is really try to use your E flash. It's almost a guarantee. If you land E flash, it's pretty much a guaranteed kill on a range champ every time. So in those lanes, I really try to just play off my flash and just try to scale. Another thing you want to keep in mind against bad matchups is that you're going to still scale well into team fights. So even if you can't do much in lane and the lane is really painful, you're going to do more than those champions in team fights, even if you're losing the lane. So always keep that in mind. You're still going to scale. You can still do your thing, even if the lane isn't too enjoyable. But yeah, those are my personal least favorite matchups. Next question we got is, what are some good matchups for Urgot? My personal favorite matchups would be any melee champ is pretty fun. Any like melee fighter. So I really like Riven, Jax, Fiora, Irelia. Irelia can be a little bit more tricky. I also really like Sylas, Singed, Akali. Those champions are just pretty easy to land E on. There's usually a lot of trading in those matchups, and yeah, just have a lot of fun in those lanes. There's usually a decent amount of thinking and just trading involved. Alright, next question is, what are your best tips for beginner Urgot players? I would honestly say don't go too aggressive in too many lanes. A lot of the lanes you can play aggressive levels 1 to 3, especially if you go D-Blade and start E. But after that, you don't want to be too aggressive in lanes. Like, remember that you're a scaling champ. A lot of lanes are going to be pretty difficult for you. So definitely keep that in mind. You don't want to be trying to brute force every single lane, you know, on a scaling champion. Level 9 is where you really come online. You get that W toggle. Level 11, level 13, those are going to be power spikes. You start getting some items. That's when you can start really having some fun on Urgot. And that's really just when you come online. My other tips would be play around your passive. Your passive is super important. It's like the arrow indicators around your champion. Those are your passive legs. The shotgun knees. Those are really important to play off of. So especially with your E, like before you go for an E, you want to try to get your passives off, so then you fling them into your other passives. Another thing to keep in mind, you can ulti off your E, so that's a way to pretty much guarantee to hit your ulti. A lot of people ask me, like, I'm always missing ulti. How do I land ulti? Well, a good way to do that is just land your E. So that's another tip, is don't lead with your E. You want to be leading with your Q a lot of the time, so you can get in range to use that E. And then if you land that E, then you're guaranteed to land the R, because they're going to be stunned and you know where it's going to fling them. My other tip would be try to play off your team in team fights. Especially Urgot excels in team comps that have a lot of CC and engage. If you see someone locked down and you know that your team is going to burst them, then you should be looking for an ultimate on that person so you can get a fear and then possibly flash in onto their backline and just fear their entire team comp. Like, that's honestly how I win a lot of team fights on Urgot. If you get a big fear, like your team is going to win that team fight. So those would be my basic tips. I'm also going to drop my guide down below in this video if you want to see more like in-depth tips on Urgot. But yeah, that'd be my basic tips. So next question we got, is Urgot stronger or weaker this season? This is actually a very interesting question, because I think overall in terms of winning he's weaker, but I think full build he's a lot stronger now. I think his issues with the meta right now is basically that games are a lot shorter and a lot faster paced, so you don't have as much time to scale. And not only that, but a lot of other champions got stronger, including Urgot, but also including those other champions. So there's a lot more true damage. I feel like you do die quicker this season, but you can output a lot more damage than last season. So I feel like overall he's stronger in terms of damage, but he's weaker in terms of win rate, basically. So the last question is going to be, what's your favorite skin for Urgot? And honestly, I like all of Urgot's skins. My favorite skin, though, would be High Noon with the red chroma, personally. I like High Noon with pretty much all the chromas, but I really like that red chroma. It just makes you look like such a beast. I feel like it fits Urgot's theme really well. You just look really, really menacing. Every time I use that skin, I feel like people honestly fight me less because they're just like scared of how I look. But yeah, High Noon with red chroma, definitely my favorite, but I really like all of his skins. Alright guys, that is going to wrap up the video, but I appreciate you guys watching. If you found this video helpful at all, consider dropping a like on it. Helps it get out there, helps it do a little bit better, helps support me. Also, if you guys want to comment down below if you have any other questions, I could always do a part 2 of a video like this. Because honestly, I have a lot of fun making videos like this, so comment down below your questions. I might use them for a part 2. And I'm also going to leave my Mobifier guide in the description below. We have a lot of Urgot info on there, a lot of updated builds, a lot of updated rune pages. I'm still working on some of the matchups. A lot of the matchups did change with Season 11, so I'll be updating that slowly as well. I'm also going to leave my Twitch stream down below if you want to check me out live, watch me feed in Diamond. But yeah, appreciate you guys watching, and have a blessed one. Peace out, guys.